The station was quiet that night, too quiet. Dock 9 should have been full of noise, cargo drones buzzing, ships humming, workers yelling. But tonight, it was only cold silence and flickering lights. Officer Jake Tora, a tall human with tired eyes, walked beside his partner, Rylana. She was from the Valari species, tall, silver-skinned, and had eyes that saw more than most could hide. Dock 9 again, Jake muttered, checking his scanner. Third time this month, no record of arrival, Rylana replied, her voice calm but sharp. But something is here. A rusted cargo ship sat crooked against the metal floor. No lights on, no ID tags, no crew, just one large crate, locked and bolted. Sitting in the middle of the cargo bay, Jake walked toward it slowly, his boots clicking against the steel. Rylana followed, her hand resting near her pulse gun. Jake knelt and scanned the crate, frowning. No life signs, he said. But the crate's warm. Open it, Rylana whispered, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. With a hiss of air and creak of old metal, the crate's door slid open. What they saw made both of them freeze. Inside the crate were children, 6 of them, small, scared, and silent. Some had bruises. Others clutched each other tightly. None of them looked older than 8 years. Jake's voice cracked. They're alive. One of the kids looked up at him, her eyes glowing faint blue in the dark. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just stared. Rylana stepped forward slowly. Kneeling at the crate's edge, she spoke in 3 alien tongues, but none of the children responded. They've been sedated, she said softly, and starved. Jake tapped his command. We've got live miners in Dock 9. A pause, then static. Then a cold voice answered, understood. We'll send cleanup. Jake frowned. Cleanup. These are kids, but the voice had already cut off. He looked at Rylana, and she looked back. They both knew something bigger was going on. Something dark. We take them ourselves, Jake said, standing up to the medical bay. No. He shook his head. Too many eyes there. Rylana nodded. I know a place. They gently lifted the children out, one by one. The smallest one held tightly to a worn blanket with alien writing. Jake couldn't read it, but the fear in her eyes needed no translation. As they left the dock, Rylana paused. She turned back and scanned the inside of the crate again. Hidden in the corner was a small device, a tracker. She crushed it under her boot without a word. Jake drove the hover van while Rylana sat in the back with the children. The streets of the station were dark and nearly empty. The children didn't speak, but one of them, a boy with gray skin and soft horns, reached out and held her hand. He was trembling. So was she. They arrived at a hidden shelter deep in the lower levels. Rylana's old friend, a retired medic named Karu, helped them set up beds. Jake checked each child, looking for wounds. He'd seen war, he'd seen death. But this was different. These kids weren't just smuggled, he said, quietly. They were stored. Rylana looked over, her face hard. This wasn't random, she said. Someone paid to keep them hidden. The smallest girl finally spoke, her voice dry and small. Maka, she whispered. Rylana froze. What? Did you say, Maka? The girl repeated, then closed her eyes. Jake looked confused. Who's Maka? Rylana's voice dropped. A name from the war, she said. One that should be dead. Jake felt a chill run down his back. This wasn't just a smuggling case anymore. This was a secret someone wanted buried along with the children outside. Above the shelter, a small red light blinked on a wall. Someone was watching, and they weren't going to let the truth escape so easily. Jake sat on the edge of the metal cot, staring at the cracked wall of the shelter. The children were asleep, curled up in makeshift beds. Rylana stood near the door, her arms crossed and her thoughts far away. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence too heavy. The smallest girl had whispered a name, Maka. Jake didn't know it, but Rylana did, and the look on her face had changed the moment she heard it. "You knew that name?" Jake finally said. Rylana nodded slowly, her voice tight. "During the Valari Civil War, Maka ran a black unit." "What kind of unit?" "They stole children," she said coldly, "promised them safety, then sold them to labs or mining colonies." Jake cursed under his breath. He looked over at the sleeping kids, one of them clutching a cloth doll with a missing arm. "They've been through hell," he said. "They're not safe yet," Rylana replied. "Not even close." At that moment, a soft beep came from the entrance panel. Rylana moved first, drawing her weapon. Jake followed, keeping low. Carew, the old medic, came rushing. In his face pale, "There's movement on the outer corridor," he whispered. "Two armed figures, no badges." Jake's heart jumped. "They found us," he said. Rylana moved fast, setting up a force field at the front door. It wouldn't stop a full attack, but it would slow them down. Jake grabbed his comm device and tried to reach Central. Nothing. Static. Again, "They've cut comms," Rylana said, checking her. "Scanner." Jake glanced back at the children, still asleep, still unaware of the danger closing in. Rylana took a breath. "We have one shot." Jake looked at her, confused. "There's an old smuggler tunnel behind the supply shelf," she said, moving toward it. "No one uses it anymore, but it leads to a safe district." They moved quickly, lifting the shelf, revealing a narrow passage behind, dark, cold, and filled with dust. Jake picked up the smallest girl and carried her. Rylana guided the others, her voice soft but firm. "Stay close, don't make noise. We're going to a better place." They were halfway through when something clanged outside. A door being forced open. Jake didn't look back. He just moved faster. He could feel the child in his arms, breathing hard. But she stayed silent, too used to hiding. The tunnel opened into a maintenance shaft above the old market zone. No one came here any more perfect. Carew had gone ahead and prepared another room inside a forgotten storage unit. The kids settled in again, though some had started crying now, not loud cries, but the quiet, shaking kind that tore at Jake's heart. He sat down with the little girl who said, "Maka, what's your name?" He asked softly. She blinked at him, then whispered, "Lula." He smiled, even though he felt like screaming. "You're safe now, Lula." She nodded once, then laid her head on his arm. Rylana entered a moment later with a small device. "I pulled something from the crate's floor before we left," she said. Jake leaned in. It looked like a chip, covered in grime and almost broken. "Can you read it?" She plugged it into her portable decoder. The screen flickered, then a file opened. Jake stared. Dozens of names, coordinates, transaction codes. Each entry listed a child, followed by a date, a destination, and one word sold. "This is a smuggling ledger," he said in disbelief. Rylana nodded, her face pale, "And it's recent." Jake's fists clenched. "They're selling kids like packages." Then Lula's voice came again. "Maka," she whispered. Pointing at the screen, they looked, and there it was, one transaction signed with that name. Not dead, not gone, active. Rylana stepped back, her eyes dark. "He's still out there," she said. "And now he knows we found the children." Jake looked down at Lula, then at the list again. This wasn't just about saving 6 kids anymore. It was about stopping something much bigger, outside, far above the station. A sleek black ship activated a beacon. It didn't have a flag, didn't have a call sign, but inside, a figure sat. Watching surveillance feeds, he saw Jake, he saw Rylana, and he saw Lula. His face didn't change, but his eyes glowed faint red. Then he gave a single command: erase them all. Began not with words, but with a sharp metallic ping echoing through the shelter's ventilation shaft. Jake snapped awake, hand on his weapon. Rylana was already crouched. Scanning the walls with her portable detector, something's tapping. Into the old relay cables, she said quietly. Surveillance bots, maybe? The children were still asleep, all except Lula. She sat in the corner, hugging her blanket, watching them with wide eyes. Jake gave her a small smile, trying to hide the tension on his face. We're safer now, he said. Though he wasn't sure anymore, Rylana finished scanning, then stood up. I found something else, she whispered, tooting out the data chip from earlier. Jake leaned in as she loaded the decrypted files onto a private server. The hologram flickered and showed a single word glowing in red. Manifest. Ghost Starline, Jake. Frowned. Never heard of it. You wouldn't, Rylana replied. It was a covert program during the Frontier Wars, designed for silent transport, no logs. No trace. So it's a ghost ship, Jake said slowly. Moving cargo no one's supposed to find, including children, Rylana added bitterly. She tapped deeper into the file, pulling up what looked like ship routes, the last recorded stop. A mining moon called Peltra 7, but the ship never logged a departure from there. No records, no signatures, just ... Vanished. We follow it, Jake said. If we find where the ship came from, maybe we find where the others went. Rylana looked hesitant. It's off-grid space. Jake met her eyes. So were those crates. They contacted Keru and made a plan he would stay and protect the children while they followed the Ghost Starline trail. Before leaving, Lula walked up to Rylana and handed her something. It was a broken bracelet with 3 beads. Rylana looked at it in confusion. That belonged to my brother, Lula said quietly. He was taken 2 moons before me. Jake gently patted her shoulder. We'll find him. An hour later, Jake and Rylana were aboard a borrowed patrol vessel. They flew silent, with stealth mode on. The stars stretched endlessly ahead. But their course was locked Peltra 7 as they neared the coordinates. Strange things started happening. Their sensors picked up interference. The nav system glitched, forcing them to rely on old manual inputs. Then, as they came into range, something appeared on their scope. A massive object cold. Silent, floating. There it is, Jake whispered. The Ghost Starline. It looked like a forgotten graveyard of metal, huge and rusted, with scorch marks. Across the hull, there were no lights, no heat signatures, no signs of life, but the docking bay was open, as if waiting for someone to return. They floated in slowly, weapons drawn, nerves sharp. Inside, they found silence thick as fog. No bodies, no crew, just crates, hundreds of them, all sealed. Each one was marked with a number, and a color code Jake didn't recognize. Rylana cracked open one crate, her breath catching. Inside were old clothes, toys, and photos, she whispered. Of children. Jake opened another and found documents, medical reports, he said, signed by Maka. And then something moved. It was small, fast, and hidden in the shadows. Jake raised his weapon. Who's there? No reply. Rylana scanned the shadows and found a heat signature. They approached carefully, weapons lowered. It was another child, this one older, maybe 10, with pale skin and eyes that glowed yellow in the dark. He looked sick, but alert. He didn't speak, just pointed to the ceiling above them, on the bulkhead. Was a strange device still active, blinking? Jake climbed up and scanned it. A data relay sending encrypted signals every 30 minutes. To where? He muttered. Then the child finally whispered. Maka watches. Jake's blood turned cold. He looked at Rylana, who was already backing up. We have to leave, she said quickly. Now. But it was too late. Behind them, in the control room, screens flickered to life, dozens of them, each showing different places. Docking bays, black market auctions, even medical labs. And on one of them, the shelter, Rylana gasped. They'd been watching the children the whole time. Then, a voice came through the ship's speakers. Deep and calm. You found my collection, it said. Now, let's see what you'll do to keep it. The lights shut off, the doors sealed. Jake raised his weapon, heart pounding. This was no longer just a mission. It was a trap. Asterisk, the walls of the Ghost Star line groaned like something alive. Jake pressed his back against the cold metal, eyes darting toward the flickering lights. Rylana was crouched beside the older alien child. Whispering to him, the voice had stopped, but its presence still filled the ship like poison. Doors. Locked, Jake said, checking the control panel. Manual override is fried. Rylana glanced at the child. What's your name? The boy looked up with empty eyes. They called me Specimen 9. Jake froze. Not your name. Your real name, he said, gently. The boy hesitated, then said softly. Ren. Jake nodded. Okay, Ren, we're getting you out of here. But Mac is here, Ren whispered. He speaks through the ship. Rylana stood quickly and scanned the ceiling again. Integrated AI mesh, she said. The ship's brain is him, or at least a copy of him Jake didn't like. That? Not one bit? Then this whole place is watching us. Suddenly, gas began hissing from hidden vents. Rylana grabbed a mask from her belt and handed another to Jake. Ren coughed and stumbled. Jake scooped him up without hesitation. Let's move, he growled. They sprinted down the corridor, guided only by the flickering emergency lights. Jake's boots echoed with every step. Behind them, a wall slammed shut, cutting off the way back. He's hurting us, Rylana said, breathless, just like the children. They turned a corner and found a chamber filled with crates. But these were different glass sides, wires inside, and movement. Jake stepped closer, eyes wide. Children in stasis chambers, dozens of them, asleep or unconscious, kept like relics. Rylana's hand trembled as she counted. They're alive, she whispered, but their vitals are low. Then a speaker crackled above them. You see now, the voice said, calm and cruel. They are priceless, untouched, pure. Jake's jaw clenched. You're a monster, he shouted. They're kids, not currency. The lights flashed red. One of the stasis chambers began to drain. Inside, a small boy opened his eyes. Terrified. No. Rylana gasped, rushing forward. He's activating termination. Jake moved fast. Smashing the control panel with his weapon, sparks flew, and the system glitched. The boy inside stopped shaking and slowly went still alive but unconscious. Jake looked around, breathing hard. We can't save all of them right now, he said. We need help. Rylana nodded. We record everything. She pulled a microdrone from her belt and released it into the air. It flew quietly, scanning each chamber and transmitting the images to a secure backup server. Meanwhile, Ren tugged on Jake's jacket. There's a lift behind the storage room, he said. It goes down very deep. Jake narrowed his eyes. What's down there? Ren looked scared. The first lab, before Jake could ask more. An explosion rocked the ship. The floor shook. Lights went out again in the darkness. Alarms began to scream. Someone was attacking the Ghost Star line from outside. Did you call someone? Jake asked. No, Rylana answered, but maybe. Someone saw our broadcast. They ran toward the lift, fighting through smoke and sparks. Ren led the way this time, small but brave. When the lift opened, it revealed an old shaft, rusty and dark. Jake and Rylana stepped in, weapons ready. Ren pressed a code. He remembered Dan old code, burned into his memory by force. The lift groaned and began to descend, slowly, deeper into the ship's heart. Down below, something moved in the dark. Machines hummed and metal arms twitched, cages rattled, and cold eyes flickered to life. Jake felt it in his bones. Whatever waited below wasn't just machinery. It was the beginning of Macca's horror, and they were stepping straight into it. The lift stopped with a hard jolt. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the door creaked open. Jake stepped out first, weapon raised, eyes scanning the hallway ahead. It wasn't like the upper decks. This place felt ancient, older than the war. Older than the ship itself. The walls were lined with cables, screens, and broken machines. Strange symbols glowed on the floor, slowly shifting as if alive. Rylana stepped beside him, her face pale. "I've seen this kind of tech before," she said softly. "This isn't just smuggler tech." Jake looked at her, confused. "This is pre-Union tech," she whispered, "before the galaxy had laws ahead of them." Ren paused and pointed to a door at the end of the hall. "He took us in there," he said, shaking slightly. "That's where the others changed." Jake pushed the door open slowly. The room inside was a nightmare. Rows of empty tanks with claw marks inside the glass. Broken restraints on the walls and dried fluid on the floor. In the corner an old chair with arm straps. Blood still stained the metal. Rylana knelt beside one of the tanks and touched the controls. A hologram flickered to life, showing a recording. It was a young alien child strapped to the chair. Crying out, a voice spoke calmly over the screams. "Subject 42 shows strong mental resistance. Proceed with neural override." Jake turned away, his fists clenched. "I'm going to burn this place down," he growled. Rylana's voice shook. "Not yet. We need proof." She pulled the recording and sent it to her secure server. Then, suddenly, the walls shook again. A new alarm began, deeper, colder. But this one wasn't coming from the ship's systems. It was biological. Ren backed away, his eyes wide. He woke them. The boy said he kept the last batch. Different from down the hallway. Metal doors opened on their own. Figures stepped out tall. Thin, not children anymore. Twisted forms with glowing eyes and implanted metal across their skin. Half machine, half child, completely silent. Jake raised his weapon. "Don't move." But they didn't stop. They moved together. In sync, like they shared one mind. Rylana fired first. Hitting one in the leg, it staggered but didn't fall. Jake followed, aiming for the core. Still no effect. "They're not alive in the normal way," Rylana said, pulling out a sonic disruptor. She activated it. And the sound wave echoed through the chamber. The twisted children dropped instantly, twitching on the floor, not dead, but disconnected. Jake ran to the nearest one and checked its neck, a chip pulsing under the skin. "Maka did this," he said quietly. "Turn them into something programmable." Then a screen on the wall flickered on. A face appeared, hollow eyes, pale skin, and a crooked smile. "Maka, I warned you," he said calmly. "But you came anyway." Rylana stepped forward. "You're finished, Maka." "The evidence is out." He only chuckled. "No," he said. "The galaxy doesn't care until it's their children. Now," he added, "you'll get to see how much they cared about yours." The screen switched to live footage, the shelter, Karoo, standing at the door, holding a weapon. The children behind him, scared and hiding, and shadows moving outside the windows. Jake's heart dropped. "They're attacking the shelter," Rylana grabbed Ren. "We have to get back, now." Maka smiled wider. "Too late," he whispered. Then the screen cut to black. Jake turned to Rylana, his voice sharp and clear. "We split up," he said. "You take the kid and the files, and get to the surface. I'll hold this place. Make sure Maka doesn't delete the rest." Rylana hesitated. "You'll die down here." Jake gave a tight grin. "Only if I stop moving." She nodded once, quickly, and handed him her backup. "Come. Don't be a hero, Jake," she said. He winked. Too late. As she disappeared down the hallway with Ren, Jake turned toward the control room. He had a new plan now, if he couldn't stop Maka yet. He could lock him in. The sky above the shelter burned orange as the security grid failed. Screams echoed through the corridors while shadows crept toward the hidden entrance. Karu stood alone at the front door, clutching an old plasma rifle. With shaking hands, behind him, the children hid in silence, their small bodies trembling in fear. He had seen war, yes, but never like this. This wasn't a battle, was a hunt, and the prey was innocent. Above, unseen, a black drone hovered, projecting a red signal beam across the street within seconds. A small strike team appeared from the shadows, fully armored, faces covered, moving without a sound. They advanced slowly, methodically, surrounding the shelter inside. Karu whispered into the last working comlink. "Relena, Jake, someone. Anyone, please respond." No reply, only static. He turned to the children, forcing a calm smile. "Stay close," he said. "Don't speak. And don't move unless I say." One of the older children, a boy with green skin and 4 fingers, stepped forward. "You'll fight them alone." Kiru nodded. "Until help arrives. Will it?" Karu didn't answer. Far away, Rylana was racing through the tunnels of the Ghost Star Line. Carrying Ren in her arms, behind her, doors slammed, sparks flew. And Maka's voice filled the air again. "You're too late," he hissed. "You chose to run instead of fight." She ignored him, pushing harder. Every second wasted was a second closer to death for the children. For Kiru, for all of them. Ren opened his eyes, coughing. "My brother," he whispered. "He's still." On this ship, Rylana slowed for just a moment, torn between choices, but she shook her head. "We'll come back for him, I promise." She tapped a hidden panel on the wall, revealing a service hatch, the emergency escape tunnel. Sealed for years, she forced it open and slipped inside, disappearing into the cold metal darkness. Back in the lab, Jake had reached the main terminal. He placed a pulse charge near the core system and began uploading every file to Rylana's private server. Every name, every transaction, every face. It was all their years of stolen lives. As the upload neared completion, Maka's voice returned. "You think this will stop me?" He said calmly, "You don't understand what's coming." Jake looked at the blinking console. "I don't care," he growled. "Let the whole galaxy see what you are." He hit send. The files jumped through encrypted channels across dozens of relays. A second later, warning lights turned red. Maka had triggered the auto-destruct. "You'll die with my secrets." The voice spat. Jake didn't move. "No," he whispered. "You'll die with your truth exposed." He turned and ran, the floor beneath him shaking. Panels falling from the ceiling. He didn't know if he would make it out, but he knew he had to try. Meanwhile, Rylana burst from the emergency tunnel onto the upper platform. Just outside the Ghost Star Line, a beacon was already flashing in the sky, her backup signal. 2 scout ships appeared from the clouds, their lights sweeping the landing pad. She handed Ren to the medics and jumped aboard the lead ship. "Take us to Shelter 9, she ordered. "We just lost comms with them." The pilot said. Rylana's heart pounded. "Faster," she said. "They're under attack, back at the shelter." Karu was running low on charges. The attackers had breached the outer wall. One of them threw a flash grenade into the room, blinding him for a second. That second was almost fatal, but before they reached the children, a sonic blast knocked them off their feet. Rylana stormed through the smoke, weapon blazing. Scout troopers dropped in behind her, engaging the enemy with expert precision. The children screamed, but this time in hope, not fear. Karu collapsed near the wall, breathing hard. "You took your time," he said with a broken laugh. Rylana knelt beside him. "You bought us enough." She looked around, scanning every child. They were alive, shaken, but alive. Then one of the soldiers approached her with a datapad. "Ma'am, this just came through the net," he said. "It's from Jake." Her fingers trembled as she opened the message, a video log. Jake's face appeared on the screen, bloodied, bruised, but still alive. "If you're seeing this, I made it out," he said. "Or I didn't, but I finished what we started. I gave them a name," he added. "I gave every child a name." The soldier spoke again. "Ma'am, it's gone viral. Every major channel is playing it. Even the Galactic Council is responding." Rylana turned to the kids, her voice breaking. "You're not hidden anymore," she said. "The galaxy is watching now." The galaxy didn't turn overnight, but it turned. 2 days after Jake's message was broadcast, the networks exploded. Every species, every system. Every council watching those stolen names scroll across the stars. The footage of the children. The labs, the auction code set was undeniable. No more silence, no more pretending they didn't know. The Galactic Council was forced to act. They issued warrants, shut down corrupt trade hubs, froze black market credits, but most importantly, they did something rare. They apologized in front of cameras, in front of orphans. It wasn't enough. But it was a start at a refugee station above Valari Prime. Dozens of alien families stood waiting in the docking bay. They had heard the call, not a political call, not a legal one, a human's call, a broken man's voice asking, who will love them? And the galaxy had answered. Rylana stood with Karu near the docking ramp, watching the first group of children step forward. Each child now had a name tag, a soft blanket, and a glowing ID chip that couldn't be erased again. Lula held Karu's hand, looking up at the long line of waiting arms. "I get to pick," she whispered. He smiled. "No, little one. They'll pick you on, then you'll pick them back." Ren stood beside Rylana. Now wearing a small vest and carrying a datapad, he had become her assistant, her student, and her family. "My brother's not here," he said quietly, "but I think I know where he was sent." Rylana looked down at him, her eyes soft. "Then we'll find him," she promised, one name at a time. A loud cheer rose from the bay doors. Jake stepped off the ship alive, limping, scarred, but grinning. Lula broke into a run. Throwing herself into his arms, he caught her easily, spinning her once before kneeling down. "You did it," she said. Everyone saw. Jake looked at her, then at the others. "No," he whispered. "You did it, Lula." A news crew moved forward, cameras hovering. A reporter leaned in. "Officer Jake Tora, what's next for you?" Jake looked back at Rylana, at Karu, at the children. "Command offered me a promotion," he said, then shrugged. "I turned it down." The reporter blinked. "Why?" Jake smiled and placed a hand on Lula's shoulder. "Because I already have a better job." A new building opened that week, just beside the refugee port. A school, a clinic, and an adoption center, all in one, run by former soldiers, medics, and volunteers from 100 worlds and above the door. Written in Galactic Common, no more forgotten children. Inside, Rylana taught languages. Jake taught survival and self-defense, and Karu ran the medbay. The children now laughing. Learning, Healing called it the new place, because it didn't matter where they came from. It only mattered that now they had somewhere to stay, somewhere safe, somewhere warm. Somewhere they were never just cargo again, far beyond, on a hidden moon. A hunter watched the footage silently. He turned off the screen without emotion. Maka was gone, but others, like him, were still out there, still hiding, still selling. But now, someone was watching them. Someone was hunting them. And the galaxy had learned something it could never forget. Humanity doesn't turn away. It turns pain into purpose. And with just one voice, one soldier, and one small frightened girl in a crate, they changed everything.